My name is Heather Andrews, and at 32, I thought I knew how to handle my family. I love cooking, even though I never trained professionally. Last weekend, I spent 3 days planning a special dinner for my dad's 60th birthday. 12 people, 8 courses, and more money than I could afford. When Mom took her first bite and announced loudly, "This is not even eatable," something inside me snapped. I looked around at 12 silent faces, waiting for someone, anyone, to defend me. No one did. Before continuing with what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more family drama stories. I inherited my love of cooking from my grandmother, Evelyn. Unlike my mother, Margaret, Grandma Evelyn was patient and encouraging. She'd let me mess up in the kitchen, saying mistakes were just flavor adventures. When she passed away when I was 16, she left me her handwritten recipe book. It became my most prized possession. My mother, on the other hand, is what you'd call a perfectionist. Nothing is ever good enough for Margaret Andrews. Growing up, an A- was a disappointment, a slightly wrinkled shirt was sloppy, and a small water spot on a clean glass meant rewashing the entire load of dishes. She applied this standard to everyone but reserved her sharpest criticism for me, her middle child. Dad, Ron, is the ultimate conflict avoider. Whenever Mom would start criticizing, he'd suddenly become deeply interested in whatever game was on TV or find urgent yard work that needed his attention. I can't remember him ever standing up to her, not once in my entire life. It was easier for him to go along with whatever Mom said than to challenge her and face the Arctic chill that would follow. My siblings learned to navigate Mom's perfectionism in their own ways. My older brother Brian, 35, became an overachiever, constantly trying to meet impossible standards. He's now an attorney at a prestigious firm, married with 2 kids, living in a house too big for his family, but perfect for impressing others. My younger sister Kayla, 28, went the opposite direction, rebelling against every expectation. She dropped out of college, backpacked through Europe for 3 years, and now works as a yoga instructor. Mom calls it her phase, even though Kayla's been doing it for 6 years and is actually quite successful. Then there's my youngest brother Mark, 30, the family clown. He diffuses tension with jokes, often at someone else's expense, usually mine. He learned early that if he could make Mom laugh about someone else's failings, she wouldn't focus on his. As for me, I became the peacekeeper, the people pleaser. I'd smooth things over, apologize when I wasn't wrong, and work twice as hard for half the recognition. I'd spend hours making a homemade birthday cake only to have Mom point out that the frosting was a bit uneven on the left side, while ignoring the fact that I'd hand-piped her favorite flowers around the edges. There have been so many incidents over the years where I've swallowed my hurt. Like the Christmas I spent 2 days making a traditional Swedish smorgasbord to honor Mom's heritage, only to have her complain that the pickled herring wasn't exactly like her mother used to make. Or the time I sewed curtains for their living room as an anniversary gift, and Mom immediately pointed out that the pattern didn't align perfectly at one seam. Each time, I'd smile, apologize, and promise to do better next time. Currently, I work as a marketing associate at a mid-sized company. It's not a glamorous job, but it pays the bills for my small 1-bedroom apartment. The kitchen is tiny, barely enough room for one person to turn around, but I've made it work. I've installed shelves on every available wall space and have a narrow rolling cart that serves as extra counter space when needed. My neighbors know me as that amazing cook in 3B because the aromas from my kitchen often fill the hallway. Financial struggles are a constant reality for me. Student loans eat up a significant portion of my paycheck each month. I'm careful with money, shopping sales, and using coupons, but I never skimp on quality ingredients. I'd rather eat ramen for a week to save up for a good cut of meat or real vanilla extract. Mom doesn't understand this, suggesting I should be more practical and shop at discount stores. She doesn't get that cooking isn't just about sustenance for me, it's how I express love. Dad's 60th birthday was a milestone I wanted to celebrate properly. Mom had mentioned hosting something at their house, but in a rare moment of assertiveness, I offered to host it at my apartment. I wanted to do something special for Dad, who despite his passivity, had always been kind to me. Plus, I secretly hoped that an impressive meal might finally earn my mother's approval. The planning began a month in advance. I researched recipes that would highlight seasonal ingredients, but also include family favorites. I created a spreadsheet with a detailed shopping list, prep schedule, and cooking timeline. I even drew a diagram of my dining area to figure out how to fit 12 people comfortably in my small space. The invitation list included my immediate family, Mom, Dad, Brian and his wife Jessica with their 2 kids, Kayla and Mark. Also invited were Dad's brother Uncle Steve and his wife Aunt Linda, and Mom's sister Aunt Patricia with her husband Uncle Bill. 12 people total. I sent out beautiful digital invitations 3 weeks in advance. Everyone RSVP'd promptly. Though Mom called to ask if I was sure I could handle hosting so many people in my little apartment, I assured her I could, trying to ignore the doubt in her voice. My hopes for this dinner were multifaceted. On the surface, I wanted to celebrate Dad's birthday with a meal that would make him feel special. Deeper down, I craved recognition from my family, especially my mother. I wanted her to look at what I had created and finally say, "Well done, Heather." Most of all, I hoped for a genuine connection with my family. A warm evening of shared food and conversation where criticism took a back seat to celebration. As the day approached, those hopes grew, blossoming into expectations. This dinner would be different. I told myself, this time I would finally be good enough. Menu planning took me weeks. I wanted to create dishes that would speak to each family member, showing them I paid attention to their preferences. For Dad, his favorite prime rib as the centerpiece. For Brian, a goat cheese and caramelized onion tart he'd once mentioned enjoying at a restaurant. For Jessica, a gluten-free option since she had recently discovered a sensitivity. For the kids, mac and cheese made with 4 artisanal cheeses, elevated but still recognizable. For Kayla, a colorful roasted vegetable platter with herbs from my windowsill garden. For Mark, twice baked potatoes loaded with all his favorite toppings. For Uncle Steve, who loves seafood, scallops in a white wine sauce. For Aunt Linda, who's watching her cholesterol, a heart-healthy quinoa salad. For Aunt Patricia, who has a sweet tooth, a decadent chocolate cake with raspberry filling. For Uncle Bill, a bourbon-infused apple pie. And for Mom, the most challenging person to please, Swedish meatballs made exactly according to her mother's recipe, which I'd secretly gotten from Aunt Patricia. I spent hours comparing prices at different stores, clipping coupons, and planning my shopping route for maximum efficiency. Despite my tight budget, I splurged on quality ingredients. The prime rib alone cost nearly a quarter of my monthly food budget. I bought real vanilla beans for the cake, imported Parmigiano Reggiano for the mac and cheese, and organic vegetables for the roasted platter. I couldn't afford to buy wine for 12 people, so I asked each adult to bring a bottle to share, framing it as a way to create a varied selection rather than admitting I couldn't afford it. To give myself enough preparation time, I took Friday off work, using one of my precious vacation days. My boss raised an eyebrow when I requested it, knowing I rarely took time off, but I assured him it was for an important family event. The limitations of my small kitchen became glaringly apparent as I began prep work. My counter space was so limited that I had to set up additional surfaces. I placed a board over my sink for chopping vegetables. I used my dresser, covered with a clean tablecloth, for cooling baked goods. Even my coffee table became a prep station. My refrigerator couldn't hold everything, so I used my small balcony as additional cold storage, placing sealed containers in a cooler with ice packs. As I worked through my prep list, I encountered several challenges that forced me to adapt. The store was out of fresh raspberries for the cake filling, so I had to use frozen ones and adjust the recipe. The prime rib was slightly smaller than I'd planned, requiring me to recalculate the cooking time. The scallops looked questionable at my usual seafood counter, so I splurged even more to buy them from the upscale market across town. The stress began to mount as I realized just how much work lay ahead. My small apartment quickly filled with the aromas of different dishes, some complementary, others clashing. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I moved between stovetop and oven, balancing multiple cooking times and temperatures. Throughout the preparation, my phone pinged with texts from my friend Amber. "How's the cooking marathon going? Remember to breathe. They're going to love it all. You're a kitchen goddess." Amber's encouragement kept me going when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. She offered to come help, but I declined. This was something I needed to do myself. Not everything went smoothly. Around midnight on Friday, disaster struck when I burned the first batch of Swedish meatballs. I'd been multitasking, working on the cake layers while the meatballs were in the oven, and lost track of time. The smell of burning meat filled my apartment, and I opened all the windows despite the chilly night air. Fighting back tears of frustration, I checked my budget and realized I could just afford to buy more ground meat if I skipped lunch for the next week. I drove to the 24-hour supermarket at 1 a.m., exhausted but determined. By the time I crawled into bed at 3 a.m., my feet were throbbing, my back ached, and my hands were raw from washing dishes countless times. My alarm was set for 7 a.m. to continue preparations. Saturday morning came too quickly. I woke up with my cheek pressed against my recipe notebook, having fallen asleep while reviewing the day's timeline. Groggy and sore, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and got back to work. The morning was dedicated to finishing the desserts, preparing components that could be made ahead, and cleaning my apartment. I vacuumed, dusted, and scrubbed the bathroom until it gleamed. I rearranged furniture to create space for the folding table I'd borrowed from a neighbor to accommodate all 12 guests. Setting the table was a challenge in itself. I didn't own 12 matching plates, so I'd visited thrift stores over the past month, creating an eclectic but coordinated collection in shades of blue and white. I polished my grandmother's silver cutlery, which I saved for special occasions. I couldn't afford fresh flowers, so I created centerpieces using potted herbs and votive candles. As afternoon arrived, my anxiety increased. I checked and rechecked my timeline, making sure everything was on schedule. The prime rib needed to rest before carving. The scallops needed to be cooked at the last minute. The roasted vegetables needed to go into the oven at precisely the right time to be warm, but not soggy when served. By 5 p.m., an hour before guests were due to arrive, my apartment looked like something from a food magazine. The table was beautifully set, appetizers were arranged on platters, and the aromas of multiple dishes filled the air. I had just enough time to shower and change into the new dress I'd bought on clearance for the occasion. Standing in my tiny bathroom, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Dark circles underlined my eyes, and my complexion was flushed from hours over the stove. But there was something else there too, a spark of pride and determination. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect. This dinner would be the one to finally earn my mother's approval. As I applied a touch of mascara and lipstick, I tried to quiet the anxiety gnawing at my stomach. I'd done everything possible to ensure success. What could possibly go wrong? The doorbell rang at exactly 6 p.m. Mom was always punctual. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed my dress, plastered on a smile, and went to welcome my family. The first to arrive were my parents. Mom entered my apartment with her usual surveying glance, the one that cataloged every flaw and imperfection. She was impeccably dressed in a navy blue pantsuit, her silver hair styled perfectly. Not a strand out of place. Dad followed behind, carrying a small gift bag and wearing the slightly harried expression he always had in Mom's presence. "Heather," Mom said, air kissing near my cheek to avoid smudging her lipstick. The hallway smells like garlic. I hope the neighbors don't mind. No hello, no thank you for hosting. Just immediate criticism. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Happy birthday, I said, giving Dad a real hug. He squeezed me back and whispered, "Thanks for doing this, kiddo," before Mom called him to help hang up their coats. Where should I put these? Mom asked, holding out a bottle of wine and a small bakery box. I brought a backup dessert. Just in case. Just in case what? In case my desserts were inedible? I swallowed the hurt and directed her to the kitchen counter, where I'd cleared a small space for drinks and additional items. Dad wandered into the living room, immediately spotting the television. Mind if I check the score? The Ravens are playing today. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Brian, Jessica, and their kids, Emma and Tyler, ages 8 and 6. The children rushed in with the boundless energy of youth, immediately examining everything in my apartment. Tyler, don't touch that. Jessica called as Tyler reached for one of my decorative candles. Sorry, Heather. The kids are excited. We don't get out much these days. Jessica looked tired. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from balancing career and parenthood. Brian stood behind her, already checking his phone for emails. Great place, Brian said absently. Clearly not really looking at my apartment. Smells good in here. The first genuine compliment of the evening, and it was delivered while staring at a screen. Still, I'd take it. Next came Kayla, bringing a vibrant energy into the space. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "Everything looks amazing, sis." She had brought a bottle of organic wine and a small potted succulent as a hostess gift. Of all my family members, Kayla was the one who seemed to actually see me. Mark arrived with Uncle Steve and Aunt Linda, all three laughing at some joke Mark had just told. Mark gave me a quick side hug, then immediately zeroed in on the appetizer table. Sweet. Those bacon-wrapped dates look killer. Uncle Steve, Dad's older brother and the family patriarch since Grandpa died, gave me a warm hug. Heather, this is quite the spread. You've outdone yourself. Aunt Linda nodded in agreement, adding, "Your apartment is so cozy. You've made wonderful use of the space." Last to arrive were Aunt Patricia and Uncle Bill. Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, shared Mom's critical eye but had a softer delivery. "Heather, dear, did you make all this yourself? How ambitious." The words were complimentary, but the tone suggested doubt in my capabilities. With everyone arrived, the small apartment felt even smaller. The children were getting restless, Dad and Uncle Bill had joined forces to check the game score, and Mom was in my kitchen, opening drawers and cabinets under the guise of helping. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes, I announced. "Please help yourselves to appetizers and drinks." The appetizer platters I'd so carefully arranged were quickly descended upon. Mark loaded his plate with enough food for 3 people, while Mom took a single stuffed mushroom and scrutinized it before taking a tiny bite. "The filling is a bit heavy on the garlic," she commented to Aunt Patricia, loud enough for me to hear from across the room. I busied myself in the kitchen, putting final touches on the first courses and avoiding Mom's gaze. Kayla joined me, offering to help serve. "Don't let her get to you," she whispered. Everything looks and smells incredible. With Kayla's help, I began serving the first course. The goat cheese and caramelized onion tart for the adults and simple fruit cups for the children. As plates were distributed, I watched anxiously for reactions. Brian took a bite and nodded appreciatively. "This is good, Heather. Reminds me of that place in Chicago." A small victory. Dad was more focused on the television than his food, but he managed a distracted, delicious honey. Mom took a dainty bite, chewed thoughtfully, and then reached for her water glass, without comment. The absence of criticism wasn't exactly praise, but I'd learned to take what I could get. As the main courses were served, the conversation around the table flowed in fits and starts. Brian talked about his recent court victory. Jessica shared stories about the children's school activities, and Mark kept everyone laughing with jokes and anecdotes. Dad mostly stayed quiet, occasionally chiming in when sports were mentioned. Mom maintained her role as conversation director, steering topics away from anything too personal or potentially controversial. I moved back and forth between the table and kitchen, bringing out dishes and ensuring everyone had what they needed. With each trip, I noted who was enjoying which dishes and who was merely picking at their food. The prime rib was a hit with Dad, Uncle Steve, and Uncle Bill. The roasted vegetable platter earned genuine praise from Kayla and Jessica. The kids actually ate the gourmet mac and cheese without complaint, which any parent knows is high praise indeed. Even Brian put down his phone long enough to focus on his meal, complimenting the scallops in particular. But I kept watching Mom. She sampled each dish politely but without enthusiasm. When she got to the Swedish meatballs I'd remade at 1 a.m., she took a bite and frowned slightly. "Something wrong with the meatballs, Mom?" I asked, unable to help myself. "They're fine," she said, the ultimate damning with faint praise. "Just different from how my mother made them." "I used Grandma's exact recipe," I said. Aunt Patricia rolled her eyes behind Mom's back, giving me a sympathetic look. As the meal progressed, I felt the tension in my shoulders building. Despite the generally positive reception, Mom's tepid response cast a shadow over my sense of accomplishment. I'd worked so hard, spent so much, sacrificed sleep and money and time, all for a fine and a frown. The conversation at the table became increasingly strained as Mom's subtle criticisms accumulated. A comment about the lighting being too dim, a remark about the chairs being uncomfortable, an observation that the red wine wasn't properly aerated. Each comment like a small paper cut, not serious on its own, but painful in accumulation. I maintained my composure, smiling and refilling glasses, asking if anyone wanted seconds, playing the perfect hostess while internally counting down until dessert. "Just get through dessert," I told myself. "Then it will be over." As I cleared the main course dishes and prepared to bring out the birthday cake and bourbon apple pie, I caught sight of my reflection in the kitchen window. The excitement and hope that had fueled me through days of preparation had dimmed, replaced by a familiar resignation. Why had I expected this time to be different? With a deep breath, I placed a candle in the chocolate raspberry cake, lit it, and carried it to the table, plastering on a smile as everyone began to sing "Happy Birthday" to Dad. As the last notes of "Happy Birthday" faded, Dad blew out the candle and everyone applauded. I began cutting slices of cake, carefully portioning the raspberry filling so each piece had an equal amount. When I handed Mom her slice, she examined it closely before taking a bite. The moment she put the fork in her mouth, I knew something was wrong. Her expression shifted from polite neutrality to barely disguised disgust. "This is not even eatable," she said loudly, placing her fork down with a clatter that silenced all other conversation. "We should just order takeout next time, at least it'll be edible." The table fell silent. Even the children stopped fidgeting, sensing the sudden tension. Dad, sitting beside Mom, snorted in agreement, then quickly tried to cover it with a cough when he saw my face. "What's wrong with the cake?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. "The filling is far too tart, and the cake itself is dry," Mom declared with the authority of a professional food critic. And honestly, most of the meal was quite disappointing. The prime rib was overcooked, the vegetables were under-seasoned, and those meatballs were nothing like my mother's. I looked around the table, waiting for anyone to speak up. Brian was suddenly very interested in his napkin. Jessica was quietly shushing the children, though they hadn't made a sound. Kayla looked horrified but remained silent. Aunt Patricia and Uncle Bill exchanged uncomfortable glances. Uncle Steve and Aunt Linda became very focused on their cake slices. And then Mark, my youngest brother, always ready with a joke, said, "Well, at least the wine was good." "Oh wait, we brought that." He laughed at his own joke, and a few nervous chuckles rippled around the table. Something inside me snapped. The accumulated weight of years of criticism, of swallowed responses and suppressed hurt, suddenly became too heavy to bear. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The table fell silent again. All eyes turned to me. "You know what?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the emotion churning inside me. "I spent 3 days planning this meal. I took time off work. I spent almost a full paycheck on ingredients. I burned my hands twice and got 4 hours of sleep last night to make everything perfect." I looked directly at my mother. "And all you can do is criticize." As always. Mom's eyes widened in surprise. I had never spoken to her like this before. "Heather, don't be so sensitive," she said dismissively. "I'm just being honest. If you can't handle constructive criticism." Constructive? I laughed, a short, harsh sound I barely recognized as my own. There's nothing constructive about saying something isn't eatable. There's nothing constructive about dismissing hours of work and effort with a snort and an eye roll. There's nothing constructive about bringing a backup dessert because you assume mine will be terrible. The color rose in Mom's cheeks. "I'm just trying to help you improve." "No, you're not," I interrupted, surprising myself again. "You're trying to make me feel small. You've always tried to make me feel small. Nothing I do is ever good enough. Not my apartment, not my job, not my cooking, not me." Dad finally spoke up. "Heather, honey, your mother doesn't mean." "Don't," I said, cutting him off. "Don't make excuses for her. You've been doing that my entire life, and it needs to stop." I looked around the table at my family's shocked faces. "Next time you can all pay for takeout too, because I'm done. I'm done trying to meet impossible standards. I'm done apologizing for not being perfect. I'm done letting the fear of disapproval control my life." A nervous laugh came from Uncle Bill. "Come on now, Heather, no need to be dramatic." "Dramatic?" I repeated. "You think this is dramatic? Let me show you dramatic." With deliberate calmness, I began clearing the table, starting with my own barely touched cake slice. I went to the kitchen and returned with several food storage containers. One by one, I began packaging up the remaining food from the table and the serving dishes in the kitchen. "What are you doing?" Mom asked, her voice rising in pitch. "Exactly what it looks like," I replied, continuing to pack up the food. If my cooking is so terrible, so uneatable, then there's no reason for any of this to go to waste in your stomachs. Mark laughed nervously. "Okay, sis. You've made your point." "Very funny." "I'm not joking, Mark," I said flatly. "And if you think disrespecting someone's hard work is funny, then you can help Mom and Dad pay for the takeout." Brian finally found his voice. "Heather, you're overreacting. Mom just has high standards." "No, Brian. Mom has impossible standards, and you've spent your whole life killing yourself to meet them. How's that working out for you? Are you happy? Does she ever tell you you've done a good job? Or is there always something you could have done better?" Brian's face told me I'd hit a nerve. Jessica reached over and squeezed his hand. As I continued packing up the food, Mom stood up, her napkin falling to the floor. "Well, I never. Ron, we're leaving. I won't be spoken to this way." Dad looked torn, glancing between Mom and me. "It's okay, Dad," I said quietly. "Go ahead. You always do." The hurt in his eyes almost made me take it back. Almost. Mom grabbed her purse and coat. "Children, we're leaving," she announced to the table at large, as if everyone would automatically follow her lead. To my surprise, no one moved. Not even Dad. "Margaret," he said slowly, "I think we should stay and talk this through." Mom stared at him in disbelief. "Are you siding with her? After the way she just spoke to me?" "I'm not siding with anyone," Dad said. "But maybe we should listen to what Heather is saying." "Fine," Mom snapped. "You stay. I'm leaving." She stormed toward the door, then turned back when she realized no one was following. "Is anyone coming?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. With a final huff, Mom left, slamming the door behind her. The room remained silent for several long moments. I continued packing up food, my hands trembling slightly but my resolve firm. "So, what are you going to do with all that food?" Kayla finally asked. "I'm donating it," I replied. "There's a homeless shelter 3 blocks from here. They'll appreciate it, even if it's not up to Andrew's family standards." "Heather," Aunt Patricia began, "I'm sure your mother didn't mean." "She meant exactly what she said," I interrupted. "She always does. And for once, so do I." I pulled out my phone and, to everyone's visible shock, actually called the shelter. "Hello. My name is Heather Andrews. I have a large amount of food from a family dinner that I'd like to donate. Is that something you could use tonight?" After a brief conversation, I ended the call with, "Great. Someone will be here in 20 minutes. Thank you." The family exchanged glances, seemingly unsure whether to leave or stay. "You're really giving away all the food?" Tyler asked, his 6-year-old curiosity overcoming the tension. "Yes, Tyler, I am. Even my mac and cheese. Even the mac and cheese." He thought about this seriously. "Can I have one more bite before you give it away? It was really good." From the mouths of babes. I smiled, my first genuine smile since the confrontation began. "Of course you can, buddy." As Tyler happily took another helping of mac and cheese, the frozen tableau around the table began to thaw. Conversations resumed in awkward, hushed tones. Dad excused himself, saying he needed to check on Mom. Uncle Steve and Aunt Linda offered to help clean up. Brian and Jessica gathered their children, making apologetic noises about bedtimes. 20 minutes later, as promised, there was a knock at the door. A woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a warm smile introduced herself as Grace from the shelter. "We're so grateful for your donation," she said, looking at the substantial amount of food I'd packed up. "This will feed many people tonight." "It's my pleasure," I replied. "Everything was prepared fresh today. There's prime rib, scallops, roasted vegetables, and even a chocolate raspberry cake for dessert." Grace's eyes widened. "This is gourmet food. Our residents will be thrilled." "Are you sure you want to give all of this away?" "I'm positive," I said firmly. "I'd rather it be enjoyed by people who will appreciate it." As Grace accepted the containers, my remaining family members watched in silent witness to the transfer. I saw something shift in their expressions, a mixture of embarrassment, respect, and perhaps a touch of shame. "The cake is delicious, by the way," Grace said after I insisted she take a sample. "Perfectly moist, and the raspberry filling is divine." I couldn't help the small, vindicated smile that formed on my lips. "Thank you. That means more than you know." After Grace left with the food, an uncomfortable silence settled over my apartment. The remaining family members, Kayla, Mark, Aunt Patricia, Uncle Bill, Uncle Steve, and Aunt Linda, stood awkwardly in my living room, as if unsure of their role in the aftermath of the confrontation. Mark was the first to break the silence. "So, that happened." "Really, Mark? That's all you have to say?" Kayla snapped. "What do you want me to say? That was intense. I've never seen anyone stand up to Mom like that, not even Dad." Mark's attempt at levity fell flat. I continued cleaning up, gathering plates and silverware with methodical precision. My hands were steady now, the earlier trembling replaced by a strange calm. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie stillness. Aunt Patricia approached me cautiously. "Heather, dear, perhaps your mother was a bit harsh, but don't you think giving away all the food was excessive?" I met her gaze directly. "No, Aunt Patricia, I don't. What's excessive is spending 3 days cooking a meal for people who can't even pretend to appreciate it. What's excessive is criticizing everything I do, from my apartment to my career to my cooking. What's excessive is bringing a backup dessert to your daughter's dinner party because you assume hers will be inedible." Aunt Patricia had the grace to look embarrassed. Margaret has always been particular. Particular is choosing the window seat on an airplane, I replied. Mom is cruel. And we've all enabled it for years. Including me. Uncle Steve cleared his throat. Your mother comes from a different generation, Heather. Her own mother was very critical of her. It's the only way she knows how to show love, making sure everything is perfect. That may explain her behavior, Uncle Steve, but it doesn't excuse it. And it certainly doesn't mean I have to accept it anymore. Kayla stepped forward, putting her arm around my shoulders. I'm proud of you, sis. It's about time someone said something. Mark nodded slowly. Yeah, actually, that was pretty badass, Heather. Scary, but badass. As we continued cleaning up, the conversation shifted to stories of Mom's critical nature throughout the years. Aunt Patricia shared how Mom had criticized her wedding dress hours before the ceremony, leaving her in tears. Uncle Steve recalled how Mom had redone all the decorations for their parents' 50th anniversary party because they weren't sophisticated enough. Mark described how Mom had corrected his graduation speech so many times that he eventually memorized her version just to keep the peace. It was cathartic, this shared unburdening. Years of swallowed hurts and accommodations laid bare in my small living room. And through it all, a realization dawned on me: this wasn't just my problem. Mom's perfectionism had wounded all of us in different ways. The doorbell rang, interrupting our impromptu therapy session. I opened it to find Dad standing alone, his expression weary. May I come in? He asked quietly. I stepped aside to let him enter. The room fell silent again. Your mother has gone home in a taxi, he announced to no one in particular. She said not to wait up for her. He turned to me. Heather, can we talk? Privately. I led him to my tiny balcony, the only private space available. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of approaching autumn. I'm sorry, Dad said, leaning against the railing. I should have said something. Which time, Dad? Tonight? Or any of the 1,000 other times before? He winced. Both. All of them. You're right, I've been enabling her behavior for decades. It was easier to stay quiet than to face her disappointment. Do you know how much I spent on tonight's dinner, Dad? Almost a full paycheck. I'll be eating ramen for the next 2 weeks because I wanted so badly to impress her. To finally hear her say, "Good job, Heather." Dad's eyes widened in surprise. I had no idea. Of course you didn't. No one ever asks. Everyone just expects me to keep trying, keep smiling, keep taking the criticism. You shouldn't have had to spend that much. I would have helped. That's not the point, Dad. The point is that I shouldn't have to bankrupt myself trying to meet impossible standards. The point is that a simple thank you would have been nice. The point is that I'm done trying to earn love that should be unconditional. Dad was quiet for a long moment. Your mother does love you, Heather. She just doesn't know how to show it. That's not good enough anymore, Dad. It's just not. When we returned to the living room, I found that most of my family had taken the initiative to finish cleaning up. The dishes were washed, the tablecloth folded, the leftovers that hadn't been donated properly stored in my refrigerator. We thought we'd help, Aunt Linda said with a gentle smile. It's the least we could do. Uncle Bill approached me with an envelope. This was supposed to be for your father, but I think you should have it. He handed me a card containing a gift certificate to an upscale grocery store. For your next cooking adventure. One by one, my family members made their excuses and left, each offering awkward but seemingly genuine apologies and thanks. Dad was the last to go, hugging me tightly before departing. I'll talk to your mother, he promised. Don't bother, I replied. I'm done expecting her to change. It's me who's changing. After everyone had gone, Kayla stayed behind to help me rearrange the furniture and process what had happened. So what now? She asked, curling up on my couch with a cup of tea. I don't know, I admitted. I've never stood up to Mom before. I've never stood up to anyone, really. It suits you, she said with a smile. Backbone looks good on you, sis. We talked late into the night, dissecting the evening's events and sharing stories we'd never told each other about growing up under Margaret Andrews' critical eye. It was healing, this sisterly communion. And by the time Kayla left, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for years. As I got ready for bed, my phone pinged with a text from Grace at the shelter. Just wanted you to know your food was a huge hit. Several residents said it was the best meal they've ever had. The cake was gone in minutes. Thank you for turning a difficult situation into a blessing for others. I smiled, took a screenshot of the message, and sent it to my mother without comment. Then I turned off my phone, crawled into bed, and slept more peacefully than I had in years. The week following the dinner party was eerily quiet. No calls from Mom, no texts from Dad, no family group chat messages. It was as if I'd stepped into a parallel universe where the Andrews family didn't exist. Only Kayla maintained regular contact, checking in daily with supportive messages and the occasional meme about standing up to toxic family members. She had become my unexpected ally in this new reality. Amber, my closest friend outside the family, took me out for drinks after I finally told her the full story. We sat in a dimly lit bar, nursing cocktails as I recounted the evening's dramatic conclusion. I can't believe you actually donated all the food, Amber said, eyes wide with admiration. That's some serious movie-level revenge right there. It wasn't about revenge, I clarified, stirring my drink thoughtfully. It was about dignity. I wanted that food to be appreciated, not picked apart and criticized. Still, Amber insisted, it was a power move. You basically said, if you don't value what I offer, I'll find someone who does. That's badass, Heather. I smiled, still getting used to this new version of myself, the Heather who stood up for herself, who had boundaries, who refused to be diminished. It was uncomfortable, like wearing shoes that hadn't been broken in yet, but I was determined to keep walking in them. On day 5 of the family silence, my phone pinged with a text from an unexpected source. Brian, can we talk? Coffee tomorrow morning. I agreed to meet him at a cafe halfway between our homes. He was waiting when I arrived, 2 coffees already on the table, looking unusually casual in jeans and a sweater instead of his typical suit. You look different, I remarked as I sat down. Took a day off, he explained. First one in 8 months that wasn't for a family obligation or the kids being sick. I raised an eyebrow. Voluntary time off? Who are you and what have you done with my brother? He smiled weakly. What you said at the dinner, about killing myself to meet Mom's impossible standards, it hit home. Jessica and I had a long talk after we left your place. She's been saying the same thing for years. And you're just now listening. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. I deserved that. He acknowledged. But yes, I'm finally listening. I've been thinking about what you said, about how none of us defended you. You were right. We've all been complicit in Mom's behavior, each finding our own ways to cope instead of addressing the real problem, which is that we've normalized something that isn't normal, that we've accepted criticism as a substitute for love, that we've all been dancing to Mom's tune for so long we forgot we could choose a different song. I was surprised by his insight. Brian had always been the golden child, the one who seemed to thrive under Mom's exacting standards. I had assumed he was immune to the damage she inflicted. How's Mom handling all this? I asked, curious despite myself. Brian sighed. She's in full martyrdom mode. Lots of after all I've done for this family and no one appreciates a mother's sacrifice. Dad is walking on eggshells around her, as usual. And the others? Mark is being Mark, trying to joke his way through the tension. The aunts and uncles are staying out of it. But Kayla, he smiled, Kayla is taking a page from your book. She told Mom yesterday that she wouldn't be coming to Sunday dinner unless Mom apologized to you. I nearly choked on my coffee. Seriously? Kayla did that? Apparently your backbone is contagious. We talked for nearly 2 hours, delving into childhood memories and family dynamics with an honesty we'd never allowed ourselves before. Brian admitted to the immense pressure he felt to be perfect, how his drive for success was fueled more by fear of disappointment than actual ambition. I confessed how I'd built my entire personality around being the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over, even at the cost of my own needs and feelings. As we prepared to leave, Brian surprised me with a hug. "I'm sorry I wasn't a better brother," he said. "I'm going to work on that." "I'd like that," I replied, returning the hug. The next surprise came 3 days later, when Kayla showed up at my apartment unannounced, a bottle of wine in one hand and a peace offering in the other. "Is that what I think it is?" I asked, eyeing the familiar bakery box. "Mom's backup dessert," Kayla confirmed with a mischievous grin. I swiped it from her fridge. "Thought we could do a taste test comparison with that chocolate abomination you created." I laughed and let her in. We spent the evening demolishing both desserts. Mine was better. Even Kayla admitted it, and talking about the family drama. "Mom's freaking out," Kayla informed me between bites. She's never had anyone stand up to her like that, let alone have people side with them afterward. It's like her whole world order has been disrupted. "Good," I said firmly. "It needed disrupting." Kayla nodded. "Totally. But here's the thing, she wants to have another dinner. At her house this time. She's calling it a redo for Dad's birthday." I snorted. "Of course she is. She needs to regain control of the narrative." "Probably," Kayla agreed. But I had a different idea. What if we had a dinner just as siblings? No parents, no pressure. Just the four of us reconnecting on our own terms. I considered this. Mark, too. He wants to apologize for the joke he made. Says he didn't realize until afterward how hurtful it was. I was surprised. Mark rarely acknowledged the impact of his humor on others. And Brian, it was actually his idea. He said you two had a good talk. I thought about it. The idea of a siblings-only dinner was appealing, a chance to rebuild relationships damaged by years of unhealthy family dynamics. But I was wary of falling back into old patterns. I don't know. Kayla, part of setting boundaries is knowing when to step back from situations that have hurt you. I get that, she said. But this would be different. No mom setting impossible standards. No dad avoiding conflict. Just us four figuring out who we are as adults, as siblings, separate from our parents' influence. Her earnestness won me over. Okay, I agreed. But not at my place. I'm not cooking for the Andrews family again anytime soon. Fair enough. We'll do a restaurant. Brian's treat, he makes the most money anyway. We laughed, and, for the first time in years, I felt a genuine connection with my siblings, untainted by our mother's critical shadow. The siblings' dinner was scheduled for the following week at a casual Italian restaurant. I was nervous as I approached the table where Brian, Kayla, and Mark were already seated. Part of me expected the dinner to devolve into our usual dynamics despite our best intentions. But something had shifted. We talked openly about our shared childhood, about the ways Mom's perfectionism had shaped each of us, about our struggles to break free from unhealthy patterns. Mark apologized for using humor as a weapon. Brian acknowledged his tendency to distance himself from family emotions, and Kayla confessed to her deliberate rebellion as a form of self-protection. And I admitted my own role, how my people-pleasing had enabled Mom's behavior, how my need for approval had kept me trapped in a cycle of trying and failing and trying again. It wasn't all serious conversation. We shared laughs over embarrassing childhood stories, celebrated each other's recent achievements, and made tentative plans for regular sibling get-togethers. By the end of the evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced with my family in years. Genuine enjoyment. As we left the restaurant, Mark put his arm around my shoulders. "For what it's worth. Sis, your cooking really is amazing. Mom's just too stubborn to admit anyone could do anything better than her." Coming from Mark, this was high praise indeed. The next day, I received a text from Dad. "Your mother would like to speak with you. When you're ready." I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed time to strengthen my new boundaries, to practice being this new version of myself before testing it against Mom's criticism. I texted back, "I need some space right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk." Dad's response was immediate. "I understand. Take all the time you need. Love you, kiddo." It was a small thing, that acknowledgement of my need for space, but it represented a tiny crack in the family's dysfunctional foundation. A crack that might, with time and effort, allow something healthier to grow. 3 weeks after what my siblings had begun calling the dinner party rebellion, we gathered again for our second siblings-only dinner. This time we met at Kayla's favorite vegetarian restaurant, a cozy spot with mismatched furniture and amazing food. The difference from our first siblings' dinner was palpable. The initial awkwardness had given way to a comfortable familiarity, as if we were rediscovering our relationships without the weight of parental expectations. "I have news," Brian announced as we settled into our table. "I've started therapy." 3 pairs of eyebrows shot up in surprise. "You?" Mark asked incredulously. "Mister, I don't have time for feelings as seeing a therapist." Brian nodded, looking both embarrassed and proud. "Jessica has been asking me to go for years." After everything that happened, it seemed like time to listen to her. "That's really great, Brian," I said, genuinely impressed by his willingness to examine his life. "It's already helping," he continued. "My therapist pointed out how much of my drive comes from fear rather than genuine passion. I've been working 60-hour weeks, trying to prove something that can't be proven, trying to be good enough for standards that keep changing." Kayla raised her water glass. "To breaking generational patterns." We clinked glasses, a simple toast that carried the weight of years of shared experience. As the evening progressed, our conversation turned to childhood memories re-examined through adult eyes. Stories we'd always told one way were now seen differently. "Remember when Mom wouldn't let you go to Sophie Miller's birthday party because you got a B on that math test?" Kayla asked me. I nodded. I was devastated. Sophie was my best friend that year. "I never understood that," Mark said, frowning. "Even as a kid, I thought it was extreme." "It was emotional abuse," Brian said bluntly. "My therapist's words, not mine. Withdrawing love and connection as punishment for normal childhood imperfection." The table fell silent as we absorbed this reframing of our shared past. "So what do we do now?" Mark finally asked. "About Mom and Dad, I mean. We can't just never see them again." "We set boundaries," Kayla said firmly. "We decide what behaviors we will and won't accept. And we stick to those decisions. And we support each other in maintaining those boundaries," I added. "No more leaving each other to face Mom's criticism alone." Brian nodded. "Agreed. And we need to be realistic. This isn't going to be easy, and Mom isn't likely to change overnight, if at all." We spent the rest of dinner crafting what Mark jokingly called our sibling survival pact, a set of guidelines for supporting each other and maintaining healthier family dynamics. By the time dessert arrived, I felt something I hadn't felt in years when thinking about my family: hope. The next day, I received a text from Dad asking if he could stop by my apartment. I agreed, curious about what he wanted to discuss without Mom present. When he arrived, he seemed different somehow, less the passive bystander and more fully present. He handed me a small gift bag. "What's this?" I asked. "Just open it," he said with a small smile. Inside was a gift certificate for a series of professional cooking classes at a renowned culinary school in the city. "Dad, these are expensive," I protested, knowing the cost was well beyond what I could ever afford for myself. "You deserve to pursue your passion," he said simply. I should have supported that long ago. We sat on my small couch, and, for the first time I could remember, Dad opened up about his own relationship with Mom. How they'd met when he was young and impressionable, how her strength and decisiveness had seemed like assets in the beginning, how he'd gradually surrendered his own voice to keep peace in the household. "I failed you kids," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. I thought I was creating stability by avoiding conflict, but all I did was leave you to face your mother's criticism alone. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because what you did at the dinner party was brave. Braver than I've ever been. It made me realize how much I've missed by always taking the easy way out. And Mom? Has she had any similar revelations? Dad sighed. Your mother is complicated. She's struggling with what happened, with all of you kids suddenly setting boundaries. She doesn't understand why her guidance isn't being received as the help she intends it to be. It's not guidance, Dad. It's criticism, and it's constant, and it's damaging. I know that now, he said. And I'm trying to help her see it too. She's agreed to see a marriage counselor with me. It's a start. It wasn't the full acknowledgement I might have hoped for, but it was more than I'd ever expected. We talked for nearly 2 hours, rebuilding a connection that had been strained by years of unspoken resentments. Before he left, Dad hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, Heather. Not just for the cooking, though you are incredibly talented. I'm proud of the woman you've become, strong, compassionate, and brave. The words I'd longed to hear for decades brought unexpected tears to my eyes. 2 days later, I used the gift certificate to sign up for a professional pastry arts course. The first class was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Surrounded by serious culinary students, I felt like an imposter. But as the weeks progressed, my confidence grew. My instructor praised my intuitive understanding of flavors, and fellow students began asking for my advice. I also reached out to Grace at the homeless shelter, offering to volunteer in their kitchen once a month. Cooking alongside others who appreciated the simple joy of a well-prepared meal reminded me why I loved cooking in the first place, not for approval or praise, but for the pleasure of nurturing others through food. As for Mom, reconciliation came slowly and imperfectly. Our first meeting after the rebellion was awkward and tense, with Mom vacillating between injured dignity and grudging acknowledgement that perhaps she could be a bit critical at times. It wasn't the heartfelt apology I might have scripted, but it was a crack in her perfect facade. And through that crack, I glimpsed something I'd never seen before: my mother's own insecurity. Her desperate need to control her environment because she'd never felt secure in her worth. Understanding didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me respond with compassion rather than anger. I love you, Mom, I told her at the end of that difficult conversation. But I need you to love me as I am, not as you wish I would be. She didn't have an answer for that. But I didn't need one. My worth was no longer dependent on her approval. Over the following months, our family dynamics shifted in subtle but significant ways. Mom's criticisms didn't disappear, but they became less frequent and less cutting. Dad began expressing his own opinions more freely. Mark's jokes took on a gentler quality, targeting situations rather than people. Brian worked fewer weekends and attended more family gatherings. Kayla and I grew closer, our shared experience having forged a deeper bond. And I continued my journey towards self-acceptance and genuine confidence. The cooking classes led to a part-time catering business, which grew steadily through word of mouth. My tiny kitchen became the laboratory for recipes that would eventually form the basis of a food blog. 1 year after the dinner party rebellion, I hosted another family dinner. This time, I set clear expectations beforehand. Appreciation was welcome. Constructive suggestions could be offered privately after the meal. And any outright criticism would result in the critic being politely asked to leave. To my surprise and relief, it was the most pleasant family gathering I could remember. Not perfect, there were still moments of tension and old patterns trying to reassert themselves, but fundamentally different from the forced harmony of the past. As I looked around the table at my imperfect, complicated, evolving family, I realized that the most important ingredient in any meal isn't found in the recipe. It's the courage to serve what you've created with pride, to know its value regardless of others' opinions, and to understand that true nourishment comes not just from food, but from genuine connection. Standing up for myself that night had changed everything, not because it had magically fixed my mother or transformed my family overnight, but because it had freed me from the prison of seeking approval I would never receive. In finding my voice, I had found myself. The journey wasn't over. There would still be difficult family dinners, critical comments, and moments of backsliding into old patterns. But now I had the tools to navigate those challenges with authenticity and self-respect. As I served dessert, a chocolate raspberry cake that had been perfected through months of practice, I caught my mother's eye across the table. She took a bite and, for once, didn't immediately search for flaws. Instead, she simply nodded and said, "It's good, Heather." From anyone else, it would have been faint praise. From Margaret Andrews, it was practically a standing ovation. I smiled and served the next slice, secure in the knowledge that whether she had liked it or not, the cake was delicious. And more importantly, so was this new recipe for family relationships, one created not from obligation and fear, but from honesty, boundaries, and genuine love. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who constantly criticized you? What was your breaking point, and how did it change your relationship? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for healthy relationships. Thank you for watching. And until next time, be kind to others, but also to yourself.